Hey everyone, it's Nikolai. So today we're going to talk about the Gradient Mesh tool. Um, the Gradient Mesh tool is a very cool and super powerful tool that you can use in Illustrator to create graphics like these, things that are highly photorealistic. And like I said, they're great. They look really good, and it's all done with vector gradients. But the tool itself can be pretty challenging and in some cases really kind of wonky to work with. So today I'm going to show you how to get started with the Gradient Mesh tool, and more importantly, a little known and very useful hack for using the Gradient Mesh tool. And hopefully it's going to make your experience with the Gradient Mesh tool a lot more user friendly. All right, let's go. Adobe Illustrator 2022. You can see that I've got one artboard here. I've got this circle that I've made, and I've got a banana down here that I'm going to use as practice for Gradient Mesh. And you can see that I've created a blue outline around the banana. I've done that using the pen tool. I didn't want to, spend a bunch of time on that. Just wanted to sort of jump right into this. So just the basics of the Gradient Mesh tool. There are multiple ways to create a gradient mesh, and I'm going to just zoom in here a little bit on this circle and show you sort of the real most basic way of using the tool. With the Gradient Mesh tool, it works really well if you use sort of standard shapes like rectangles, squares, circles, ovals, things like that. And it's very easy. All you need to do is select your shape, go all the way up to the top and select Object, and then go down to Create Gradient Mesh. And you can see that I've got this these two what they're called mesh points or mesh lines. I'm going to change this rows and columns so we can see it a little bit better, and go to 4 and 4. And you can see appearance, it says to center. That means that's where the highlight is, and I can adjust the size of the highlight. I can also make it flat or make it to edge. I usually just go with to center because it looks cool. So that's basically what we've done here. We've got 4 rows, 4 columns, and I'm going to hit OK, and then open up my swatches panel. And if you don't have the swatches panel, you can always find it by going to Window and down to Swatches. Right, so let's go ahead and start colorizing this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and click off to deselect, and then start selecting individual points. Now the great thing about this is with the white arrow or the direct selection arrow, I can hold down Shift and click and select multiple of these mesh points at one time, and then add color to them all together. So if I want to make a whole group of points a similar color, I can just hold down Shift, and you can see I'm starting to color this in. I'm going to get rid of this highlight here, and I'll go ahead and put the highlight up here instead. So what I'm doing is I am selecting an individual mesh point and clicking on that, and then just clicking on a new color over here in my swatches menu. Now there are a lot of variations on this, but I can also change the shape. Again, these are all movable anchor points. And the other thing that's good to know about this is if you want to adjust the color within a mesh here, you can grab these little handles. So these are just like other vector handles, and if I grab this one up here in the blue area and drag it down, it should move the blue area down closer to the red. And I can take this little orange area I made and make it really, really small by grabbing these handles and just pulling them all the way in. And now my orange area is much smaller, and I can pull this white area or maybe the blue area over here. Grab that and drag it all the way in. And so I can actually really make a lot of adjustments on the colors here. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out, hold down Option while I'm clicking on my zoom tool. And that's basically, the really simple way of using the Gradient Mesh tool. Now, getting into a more complex object is when it gets to be tricky. So if I've got this shape right here, this banana, I will select this and say, go up to Object and say Make Gradient Mesh, Fantastic. And then this happens. So I'll hit OK just so we can zoom in there so we can show you this. But you can see that these meshes are not even. There's this really wacky curve happening here. We don't like this at all. If you have tried playing with the gradient mesh tool, you've seen this, and you might have tried adjusting these things, and you've discovered that that's just kind of a nightmare, and it does not work out for anyone. So here's how we fix this problem. Illustrator, it's quite interesting. I have to shout out to Monica Gauss. She is a really great Illustrator user. She's got a channel of her own. She shows a lot of really nice tips and tricks, and she's also the moderator of the Adobe Illustrator, one of the moderators of the Adobe Illustrator Facebook group. So again, thanks to Monica Gauss for this really great information about the blend tool. So what I found out is that you noticed before when I created that blend from the circle that it said rows and columns. And the reason it says rows and columns is because Illustrator sees the gradient mesh as a table. It is a table with rows and columns, right? So when you have that knowledge, trying to create a table out of something that has this wide variety of anchor points, you can see why that's confusing to poor Illustrator's little brain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to envision this shape as a rectangle, maybe a rectangle that's bent out of shape a bit, but think of it as a rectangle, and I'm going to click on corners. I'm going to say, okay, there's 4 corners, hold down Shift, and I'll grab this corner, and I'll grab this corner right here. So, you know, obviously this is not a rectangle, and these are not, you know, real where the actual corners of a rectangle would be. But you have to sort of imagine your shape as a rectangle that's bent out of shape, and where would those corners be, basically. So I've got those 4 points selected, no other points selected, and I'm going to go to Object and create Gradient Mesh. And now I get something that looks a lot nicer. See, immediately it looks better. I'm going to switch these numbers here and go to the minimum, which is 2 by 2, and really just simplify this a lot. And appearance sets to center, and that's fine right now. It filled it with white. We'll go on from there in just a minute. But the next thing I want to do is clean this up. So there's a bunch of hidden anchor points that show up in here that we don't really need. And again, the Mesh tool has created these hidden anchor points, and the way I'm seeing them is by clicking on the pen tool and sliding down and getting the delete anchor point tool. So I want the delete anchor point tool, and as soon as you pick that up, these sort of shifty, sneaky extra anchor points show up. So I'm going to just delete. You see, I deleted that one and it didn't really do anything. That one, the line's straightening a bit. This one, you know, it's still looking good. Now this line is a little bit straight, but I'm not too worried about that. Again, if you don't know, I'm holding down spacebar, and that is turning my cursor into the hand tool, which allows me to just drag around the page and navigate. So I'm going to just delete these anchor points and then go back to my direct select tool, click on this anchor point, and now I can just click and hold down the mouse key and pull this little controller out. And again, I'm going to hold down the space bar, drag this over, switch back over to my delete anchor point tool, and yeah, there's a couple here too. So let's get rid of these guys. They're not really helping us. And again, switch to my direct select tool. I do that by hitting A on the keyboard. Click on that, drag that out so that it matches the contour of my piece of fruit here. So now I've got a much nicer mesh to start with. And I'll just move that, and I can move these anchors about so get a nice smooth curve here. Okay, so that is the basics of getting started and this really great hack. Now I'm going to keep going with this. So if you want to watch me fill this in, I'll do some high-speed stuff in a little bit, but I'll get started on this so we can see how the magic of the gradient mesh tool works. So what I'm going to do here first is show you my layers, and I've done something here. I've created a special layer for just the banana, the drawing of the banana. If you notice, you can see that the little blue dot tells me that the drawing that I've selected is currently on layer 1. Layer 2 is where I have the banana, and I'm going to unlock that, and I'm going to double click in this area right next to where it says layer 2 to get to the layer option. So double click right here. I get my layer options. I'm setting this as a template layer, and I'm going to set dim images to 100%. And I'll show you why that's useful in just a minute. Okay, so I'll hit OK, close up my layers panel, and I'm going to also lock down that banana. I could just lock the layer. Just go back here and click on my layers panel and relock that layer so I don't accidentally select the banana. All right, so now I want to create some additional meshes for this thing. So here's why we made that layer into a template and we set dim images to 100%. The reason we did that is so I can hit Control or Command Y and I'll go into outline mode, but I can still see the image. So that's why you set dim images to 100%. It's a really nice trick if you have an image that you're tracing and you want to be able to see your drawing and also continue to see the complete image. Still making adjustments here. I can't help myself. Sorry. All right, so I'm looking at this banana. There's definitely sort of a place where the color changes, and where there's a place where the color changes, I'm going to actually create some new meshes. And to do that, I'm going to go over here to the Mesh tool. I can hit U on the keyboard to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and just line that tool up. And when I see the little plus sign, that means yes, you can create a mesh. I'll click once, and I've created a new mesh, which I can then switch back to my direct select tool if I want to adjust this curve a little bit. And it looks like there's some a little bumpy here. Yep, sure is. So I can get rid of that one. Again, it's this thing where if I hit the delete anchor point tool, I can find the extra anchors. And these ones up here I'm not too concerned about. I think they're okay. But I know there's going to be a fairly sharp discoloration right here. So what I'm going to do is create another mesh line right next to the first one, right below it, in fact. And that's going to help us get this sort of much quicker sort of color change. Okay, so with this, we are ready to start coloring. So I'm going to basically be toggling back and forth on my keyboard between the U key to give me the mesh tool and the I key to give me the eyedropper tool. I'm going to double check something here. Double clicking on the eyedropper tool, I get the eyedropper options, and there are a million of them. The only one I care about right now is this very top one, and my sample size is set at 3x3 average. You can set it to 5x5 or point sample. I find that point sample gives you sort of too fine of a point, and you pick up 1 pixel of color at a time, basically. So I like the 3x3 average because you kind of get more of a realistic assessment of the color. So what I'm going to do is just start selecting these mesh points. I hit U to switch to my mesh tool, and go ahead and switch to I, and then select the color right next to that mesh. So I'm getting this nice bright yellow here. And I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to grab this point up here, hit I, switch to the eyedropper, change the color, grab this direction point over here. Again, I'm just hitting U, and then grabbing a point, and then hitting I. All right, so let's see how that looks. I hit Command Y to go back into normal mode. Okay, there's some color coming in, not bad. I'm going to get a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to U again, and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to grab this one and hit I, grab that, and I'll go up here. Yeah, it looks like there's a place where I can select that little mesh up there. And go ahead and select the color right next to it. And I'm going to click on this mesh over here. Looks like I got these really close to each other, so I'm going to have to zoom in there really tight to get the actual one that I want. But once I've got that, I can then go ahead and hit I and select this darker brown here. And while I'm out here, I might as well select these other mesh points and add some color to them. All right, I'm going to zoom back out. I just hit Command 0 to zoom all the way out, and then I'll zoom back in a little bit. And let's get some color here as well. So this main one doesn't have any color yet, so hit I and color it with the main banana color. All right, so by doing this, you can see that, looks like I missed something here, so I'm going to go ahead now and hit Command Y to get back into outline mode, and then select this guy right here, hit I, and select my color right there. Let's see how that looks now. That's better. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just zip through these and make some adjustments and fill in the rest of these, and then I'll show you some techniques for adding detail to this banana here. Okay, and there you have a pretty decently drawn banana shape. We can see here, if I move it away from the original for a second, that I've got the colors pretty good. If I wanted to spend a little more time, I could finesse this even more, especially up near the top. You see I added another mesh and it got kind of wonky, so I think it's because I had this double line here. So again, you can add meshes by clicking on the gradient mesh tool and just clicking on an existing mesh line, and it'll add a mesh in the opposite direction essentially. So at this point, what I want to do now is add some texture and a little bit of character. This banana here is very, very smooth and clean looking, but I don't want one that's necessarily that smooth and clean looking. I want something that looks a little more organic. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this back up on there. And then I'm going to hide my original banana because I don't really need it for a little bit. And now what I'm going to show you two different options for adding some texture. Up here in Effect, you can go to Artistic. And there's a couple here that work well. I like to use film grain. And it's pretty subtle. You may not see this depending on how good your video is. But you can adjust these sliders to add more grain. So you can see there's a lot of grain. There's more intensity of the grain. I don't want my banana to look that grainy, so I'm just adding a little bit of film grain here. And it just adds just a nice hint of texture to it. The other thing that works well for fruit is the sponge option here. And so that looks really kind of icky, so I don't want it to look like that. I'm going to make my brush size and change my definition and slide this down, and then also change the smoothness, bring that up a little bit. So that's looking a little bit better. But yeah, so this sponge technique works well for a wide variety of fruit and other sort of organic things. I'm going to go back to the film grain because that's what I'm just liking for this right now, and say okay. Now my banana has a little bit of texture to it. And I'm going to add even a little bit more to this. So I'm going to lock this banana down by hitting Command and 2. And then I'm going to grab this tool over here. This is called the blob brush. And you get the blob brush by clicking on the paintbrush and then going down from the paintbrush tool. So I've got the blob brush tool here, and you can make your blob brush bigger and smaller by using the bracket keys, left bracket and right bracket, to make it bigger or smaller. And those keys are right next to the P key on your keyboard. I'm going to get a dark brown color to make some little splotches on this banana. Just clicked on my swatches panel, clicked on this dark brown that lives there, and I'm going to make, I'm going to start off with some very, very small dots first. I'm just going to click sort of randomly around here to make some random groups of dots. And these are making little perfect circles. We're going to fix that and make it look a little more organic in just a bit. But now I'm going to also make my blob brush a little bit bigger and make a couple of sort of other larger splotches here by, again, just clicking around where some of these small ones are, and I'll put another splotch down here, and we'll call that good. Alright, switching back to my regular selection tool. Since the banana is locked down, I can just click and hold down my mouse key and drag across and select all of these. Now, here's another little trick. If you don't know, sometimes if you have a bunch of small objects like this, you can see all those anchor points, and I can't actually see what is happening in my drawing. So if I hit Command H on the keyboard, it hides all of those extra anchor points, and then I can actually see what's going on here with my drawing. So first thing I'm going to do is go up to opacity at the top, the transparency panel. And if you don't see the little opacity transparency panel here, you need to go to Window and make sure that Control is checked. I routinely say that you should just always have this on. You should always just make sure that that Control is checked, so you have access to these tools up here at the top. Alright, I'm going to hit opacity. I'm going to change this to multiply, and I'm going to change this to, let's say, 75% to start with. And hit Tab. Okay, maybe even a little less than that. Let's try 60%. Okay, that's a little better. All right, so they look okay. They're not great, but I do want to do one more thing. I'm going to go up here to Effect and Blur and Gaussian Blur, and I've got this set for 1.6 pixels, which looks pretty good. I could try more of a blur if I wanted to. A little less, a little more. So yeah, about 168, 17, and say OK. And then zoom out to see what it looks like. And now that's actually starting to get a pretty nice look. So if I were going to finish this out, I might make separate gradient mesh objects for the ends, or I might just use the pen tool and create some gradients of my own. But that's basically it. So don't forget about that hack that I showed you at the beginning of how to use 4 corner points to make a really nice clean mesh, and then use the delete anchor point tool to get rid of those extra sneaky hidden anchor points that the mesh tool create. Okay, so that's it for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of that. Please go to the comments below and let me know if you liked it. Let me know if you hated it. Push the like, push the subscribe, push all those other things. Also, let me know in the comments if there's something else you'd like to see. If there's a video that you'd like to, a tool that you'd like to see explored more in depth, or any techniques you want me to try out. That's it for this time. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.